Hi everybody, this is Ben, and I'm excited to share about a particularly challenging class demo that I tried for the first time. It's called a Linocut Print. Now, this is not an uncommon school project, but like me, most of my students had never tried it before. So what is a linocut? Well, put simply, it is a design carved into a linoleum block, which can then be inked and used for printing. To present this to my students, I compared this process to a form of sculpture called a relief. Carvings in relief always stay connected to their backgrounds. Next, we reviewed the three types of relief sculpture. This is a high relief, where the forms stand far out from the back. There is low relief, or bas relief, which we have seen on coins for thousands of years. And lastly, there is sunken relief. These below-the-surface carvings make us think of ancient Egypt, but much later, alongside the printing press, they provided a way for artists to mass-produce their work in the form of woodblock prints. There may be no better known or more revered examples of this method than the carvings made by the German master Albrecht Dürer. His amazingly intricate and complex designs depicting biblical and apocalyptic imagery have stood the test of time, and it is truly amazing to think that these beautiful prints resulted from a carving made in a block of wood. With Dürer's style as my inspiration, I set out to try my hand at a linocut of a very different subject, the wild landscape of Big Bend National Park, one of my favorite places. The park itself is rich in natural landmarks, rock formations, and vegetation that could all be used in this design. With a rough idea in mind, I started sketching. I usually start with very quick, very simple sketches to figure out the composition. Gradually, I'll work my way up to more detailed sketches, but for this project in particular, I knew that I would also need a master sketch to reference when I began carving. And because some of you had asked to see more time-lapse videos, here's one of me creating that illustration. For my linocut, I decided to include three main elements. In the foreground, I wanted a large ocotillo plant, as well as other desert vegetation. Now, there's a really impressive rock formation in the park called Castellon, and I knew I would be featuring it prominently. And lastly, I made the decision to do a night scene and have a large full moon rising over the horizon. One of the reasons I finished the drawing in ink was to help plan the cuts I would be making in the block. To give the effect of shading, I would have to rely on carefully carved line work, and I didn't want to go into the final without that foundation. At this point, I hadn't settled on a style for the Big Bend lettering along the bottom, but I wanted to get the words in place to have an idea about how large to make them in the final. With the drawing complete, it was time to start carving. To better see the design as they carve, I had learned that artists will often stain the lino surface with ink before starting. I decided to do the same for my project, quickly discovering that I used way too much ink. While the block dried, I worked up a simple design to add to the decorative border. Since I had never carved lino before, I wanted to begin the final with a simple carving like this. Now, unfortunately, carving linoleum is a two-handed job, and I don't have much footage of the carving taking place. I can say that I found the smallest V-shaped gouge to be invaluable for cutting fine lines and outlining shapes. The larger blades helped remove more material much faster. You definitely want a variety. In case you were wondering, yes, this carving is opposite to the composition from my sketch. This is because the final print will be a mirror image of whatever is carved in the block. I even reversed my reference photos to help with this process. It took a few solid days of learning the tools and carving to get to this point, but after a lot of hours and more than a few hand cramps, I was finally ready to try printing my design. Because the process of inking the block and creating the print was also new to me, I figured this would take some trial and error. I rolled on the ink, placed the paper, applied pressure with the Baron, and I didn't like what I got. I tried again and again with different papers, more ink, different rolling techniques. A few were close, but they all had at least some patchy and inconsistent areas. Well, fortunately, I didn't give up on the project. I tried some new ink and a couple new techniques from tutorials, and in the end, it paid off.